Chapter 10. Alex left, slamming the sticky door behind him so hard that the dishes rattled on the shelves. The front, and only, door to his apartment didn't quite fit in the frame, so it required a good hard slam, and sometimes considerable shaking, jiggling, and prayers for mercy, to get it to shut enough to be able to shoot the deadbolt. I shot the deadbolt. The door was still quivering in my hand. Alex must be really worked up. I went over to the kitchen/dining room table and sat down. What was that noise? The dishes, all 2 plates and 2 bowls that Alex owned, were still rattling on their shelves. Geez, this place was even more ramshackle than I'd thought. My legs were quivering. What was this? I was tired, sure, but I didn't think I was this tired. Was I sick? What was that noise? Oh my God! Was I having oral hallucinations because I was having a stroke? No, wait. It was just a train. I wasn't in Indiana. There weren't any trains here. It must be a plane. We were right by Monterey Regional Airport. But planes didn't make the ground shake like this. Not unless they were about to crash right into you. I looked up at the ceiling in terror, as if I could see right through it to the plane plummeting straight at my head. The table was shaking under my hand. It must be just outside the house. It didn't sound like a plane. The shaking and the deep rumbling I felt as much as heard stopped. I looked around in frantic confusion. Then I felt like an idiot. It had been an earthquake. Just an earthquake. The San Andreas Fault ran through Monterey County, along with several smaller faults. By California standards, it wasn't a particularly active fault zone, and the chances of half the town cracking off and falling into the bay were apparently small. But minor quakes weren't uncommon. We'd already had one this summer. I just wasn't used to them and hadn't thought this might be one. But it had to have been. I brushed something off my face, then looked up again. Dust fell squarely into my eyes, sending me scurrying off to the bathroom to flush them out with cold water. As I was bent over the sink, a soft paw reached out from behind the toilet and touched my ankle. I shrieked and jumped, spraying water everywhere. I don't know why. It was Fevronia, my tan, long-haired rescue cat, whom I'd brought with me for the summer. Reaching out from hiding places and placing a paw on my ankle was one of her favorite hobbies, but it still made me leap like a gaffed salmon every time. I guess the earthquake didn't freak you out too much, I said, and reached down to pet her. Fevronia pinned back her ears, hissed at me, and darted off to the bedroom. At least she hadn't drawn blood. When I came back into the dining room, I saw that a small crack had opened up where the wall met the ceiling. Dust and bits of plasterboard were drifting down onto the table. What do I do? Is the whole place about to come down around my ears? I watched the crack for a couple of minutes. It didn't get any bigger, and after a while dust stopped floating down onto the tables. We were probably safe enough. I'd pointed out to Alex when he got back, and he'd probably notify the landlord, and the landlord would probably ignore it, and I'd be out of here by Sunday anyway, and it wouldn't be my problem. Meanwhile, I couldn't use this as an excuse to get out of searching for Aaron. I wiped down the table. Then, unable to delay it any longer, I got out my phone and called Frank. Chapter 11. Hey, Rowena, you're early. You find anything? Frank had answered on the first ring. I was going to have to start interacting with him, whether I wanted to or not. Maybe, I said. What about you? Nothing substantive yet. I was impressed. I hadn't known Frank was capable of using words like substantive. It was probably official speak. He probably had an excellent command of that kind of professional lingo. It was the kind of thing I instinctively wanted to scoff at. But it made him sound more professional and less lecherous, so right now I was grateful. What you got? He said. Not a hint of sexual innuendo. Maybe he wouldn't be so bad to work with. Maybe I was kidding myself. I told him about Erin's dinner with H. I assume she's the journalist, I said. Do you know anything more about her? Maybe she knows something. Yeah, said Frank. Nice work. He sounded like he genuinely meant it. Good Lord. I was halfway to respecting him as a competent professional. Next thing I knew, I was going to start liking him. Unfortunately, I don't know a damn thing more than that, he said. And I've been looking ever since Erin told me about her. I tried to get Erin to tell me, but for once she wouldn't open her fucking mouth. She's yak, yak, yak when she should shut up, and then silent as a fucking clam when she should talk. My extremely lukewarm good feelings towards Frank started draining away again. Did he talk about Erin like this in front of her? I was pretty sure he did. And he'd shot her. In the breast. Maybe it was an accident, like they'd both claimed. Maybe it was one of those accidentally on purpose things. In any case, she was still with him. Except now she'd run away. Or disappeared, at least. I know she's been getting texts from her, Frank was saying, 'cause she got one while we were together last weekend. Probably setting up the meeting on Wednesday. So this H woman's contact info is in her phone. If I had a court order, I might be able to access her text messages, depending on how she sent them. She uses regular text when she messages me. Her cell service provider should have a record of those. But if she's using WhatsApp, they don't store those, so you have to have the actual phone itself to read them. I don't have her phone, and I don't have a court order to show to Verizon. No one's reported her missing, have they? Not that I know of, I said. There's no waiting period to report a missing person in California, said Frank. Miller could go ahead and file one right now. Only problem is, Erin's got a history of running off. No one's going to take this too seriously since she's done it a fucking million times before. And it's Friday night. The police will have plenty of real work to do. Alex said she didn't normally miss work, though, I said. Yeah, that's what's got me worried. If she'd blown off our date tomorrow, I'd be like, whatever, she's just fucking around like she used to do to Miller all the damn time. I'd set her straight and move on. But her not showing up to work has got me worried. Especially with this journalist hounding her. Alex said she might have a gun, I said. Yeah, and normally I'd be like, whatever, about that too. It's not like she didn't carry a sidearm for years, right? But combined with blowing off work, that's bad. Yeah, I said. Tell you what, he said. I'll go ahead and call Monterey PD, let them know what's going on. Maybe we can get things moving through official channels so they can ping her phone. Maybe even get a court order for her phone records if we're lucky. Meanwhile, see what you can do to figure out who this H woman is. I said. How? Well, Jesus Christ, you're the smarty pants here. Figure it out. I said. Okay. Sorry, said Frank. That was uncalled for. I'm just really worried about Erin. No problem, I said, too stunned by his apology to say anything else. And the rest of us, he went on. We're looking at a whole world of shit coming down on our heads here. I don't have to tell you. The sooner we can find this fucking H, the better. So, who do you think would be doing that kind of a story? Miller said you used to date a journalist. Who does stories like that? Investigative journalists, I said. Either freelance, or for the big publications, like the Washington Post. This sounds like just the kind of thing those fuckers at the Post would do. I said. Yeah, it does. So, go look and see who covers stories like that. I said. That sounds like it could take a while. Especially since she could be working for dozens of publications or freelancing or... I know. Frank cut me off before I could list all the reasons why this plan was a bad one. I know it's a fucking long shot. But it's what we've got right now. You say Miller's doing legwork, going bar to bar. Uh-huh. And I'll try going through the official channels. But like I said, you're the smarty pants here. And you used to date a journalist. This is your area of expertise. Start looking around and see if you come up with something. If it pays off, great. If it doesn't, well, what else the fuck were you going to do tonight? Great question, I said. I'll take a look. Great, said Frank. Get to it then. He hung up before I could say anything else. Chapter 12. Frank's suggestion seemed like an extremely long shot to me. Yes, doing an investigative piece on the U.S. program of torture in Iraq was exactly the sort of thing the Washington Post would do. So would the New York Times, the Atlantic, the New Yorker, and probably a bunch of other publications. And according to Alex, she was working on a book, which meant she could be doing all this as a freelancer. But I didn't have anything else to go on, so I might as well keep myself busy while I waited for Alex to come back. I scrolled through the Meet the Investigative Team page on the Washington Post's website. No one remotely fit the description of the woman we were looking for. I checked out the Our People page on the New York Times website. Absolutely zip. I spent a while scrolling through the Wikipedia page on New York Times employees. There were only 2 people whose first names began with H. Both of them were men, and one of them was dead. This line of inquiry was looking pretty fruitless. I started a Google search on the U.S. program of torture in Iraq, in case she'd already published something on it. I got 5,330,000 hits. The first 5 pages had nothing written by a woman with a first name beginning with H. Going through the other pages would take such a ridiculously long time it wasn't even worth thinking about. Think, I told myself. That's what you're good at. Although I hated to admit it, Frank's designation of me as the smarty pants of the group was weirdly flattering. Oddly, considering that I had a PhD in an esoteric and difficult subject, I had never thought of myself as that smart. My childhood patchwork of Montessori schools, Waldorf schools, and homeschooling meant that I'd never gotten grades or class rankings the way kids who went to regular schools did, which meant that I'd never spent a lot of time fretting about my comparative intelligence or lack thereof. I was just however smart I was, and that was fine. I'd done well in college, but academic achievement had never been my prime motivator. Living in Russia and working with refugees and torture victims had hammered home to me how weak my Russian skills were and how limited my life experience was. Of course, that job had also expanded my Russian skills and my life experience until they were both well beyond that of my peers, but the basic attitude it had instilled in me was one of humility. Doing a PhD had made me realize how unacademic I was compared to most of the other students in the program. And since the program had been at Indiana University, a state school in the Midwest, I had learned quick enough to feel inferior to the students from the Ivy League and big West Coast schools. All this meant that I wasn't used to thinking of myself as the smart one in a group. I was the nice one, the reliable one, the one who met deadlines and did the paperwork and organized events and showed up when no one else would. My advisor had made occasional comments about how high the faculty's expectations were for me, but that still seemed part and parcel with my reliability, not a sign of my brilliance. The other people, the ones who couldn't make their deadlines or show up to their events on time or make sure their documents were in order, were the smart ones. I was just their sidekick, smoothing the bumps in the road and oiling the machinery behind the scenes. And that was the position I thought I'd been placed in again here. I'd provided moral support for Alex on the drive up to Aaron's place and back, and asked the questions at the restaurant when he couldn't, and then allowed myself to be sent home when he decided it would be easier to operate without me. It wasn't that I thought of myself as weak or stupid or useless or passive or submissive or anything like that. In fact, I thought of myself as a competent, take-charge kind of person. I just didn't think of myself as special. I mean, I knew I was special and unique in the way that everyone is special and unique, but I didn't think of myself as the person to come up with a brilliant solution that would save the day. Especially in a situation like this. Surely this was a situation where Frank and Alex would do all the real work, and I'd be supportive and make cups of tea or something. I had the sudden, sickening thought that that's what I'd done all along for Dima as well. He'd been the one who mattered. I'd just been playing a supporting role. And while we all played supporting roles in the lives of those around us, I'd been playing a supporting role in my own life as well. I'd made it all about him and his career and his needs. And then he'd sent me away, and I'd had nothing left to live for. My lightning strike love had left me charred and shattered, and I had never been able to pick up the pieces. I knew that wasn't really true. I'd finished my degree and begun my career and worked on my research and started a new relationship and done all sorts of things that should have been meaningful and fulfilling. But in my heart of hearts, I didn't think any of those things were that important. Because, compared with what Dima had been doing, they weren't. They didn't give me the thing I needed most in the world, a deep sense of purpose. My job was just that, a job, and one that involved a lot of busy work and abuse and not a lot of money or security. And I didn't even have the flimsy excuse of needing to support my family. My research should have been important and meaningful, but like most academic research done these days, it was mainly about pleasing the right people and ticking the right boxes. The world would probably be a better place if I didn't do it. My teaching was important, of that I was certain, but I was still pretty interchangeable. No university and few students would care about me as a person at all. I was just a service for them, one that could be switched out as needed, with no real change in the quantity or quality of the content produced. Get a grip, I told myself. Now is not the time. Besides, you've just had a brilliant idea. All this melancholy musing about the meaninglessness of my life and my pointless devotion to another person had, in fact, opened up a useful avenue of investigation. I pulled up WhatsApp on my phone and started a message thread to Dima. Chapter 13. I have a question, I wrote. It's fairly urgent. Do you know of a female journalist? Probably American. First name starts with H? She probably covers conflict or human rights or something like that. Maybe about 50, fluffy hair with gray streaks. There was a 10-hour time difference between Ukraine and California. It was already the next morning where Dima was. Of course, that didn't mean he'd be available. I should get back to trawling through the internet in case I got lucky and stumbled upon H on my own. After another half hour of that, I was no closer to discovering her identity or Aaron's whereabouts. I was debating texting Alex to see if he'd made any progress, when my phone pinged. I checked my notifications. Alex. I hated myself for feeling a tiny bit disappointed when I saw his name on the screen. May have gotten a lead, he wrote. The bouncer at the third bar I went to remembers Aaron coming in Thursday night. She's a regular there, so he's pretty sure. That's great, I wrote back. Does he know anything else? Just that she came alone, sat in the corner by herself, had a couple of drinks while texting up a storm, then left about 10 p.m. Did he see which way she went? Nope, it's not much of a lead. But it's better than nothing. At least we know she was alive and in town then. And it also sounds like she was pretty stressed about something. I'm going to keep going, see if I can find out anything more. Sounds good, I wrote. Meanwhile, I'll keep working here. Frank suggested I try to look for the journalist. Do you think you have any chance of finding her? I could feel Alex's skepticism coming over the text. It was well-founded. A very slim one, but I can't think of anything better to do. If you have any suggestions, let me know. No, he texted. If I think of anything, I'll let you know, but for now, that seems as good as anything else. All right, I'm off to the next seedy dive bar. Wish me luck. Luck, I wrote back. I checked the time, 9:47. I really wanted to start getting ready for bed. But even if I wanted to sleep while the others were out searching for Aaron, I didn't think I'd be able to manage it. Guess I'd better keep working then. I began a search of local papers, starting with the Monterey Herald and expanding out from there. Maybe this H person was a local journalist and was targeting Aaron because she was nearby. I'd gotten as far as the San Francisco Chronicle with no results when my phone pinged. I picked it up, expecting it to be Alex again, or maybe Frank. Darling Ina, the message read. Do you maybe mean Heather Ramirez? Chapter 14. Very possibly, I wrote back. Do you know her? Not very well. She spent a couple of weeks here in Donetsk last winter. Then she left to go to Syria. But I think she's only sort of a war correspondent. She's interested in corruption in the military and the government. I think she's writing a book on torture, which is why I thought of her. That could be her. Do you have her contact information? It's important. And urgent. I don't. But my friend Dave Wilkinson might. Let me ask him and get back to you. Thanks. Of course. It's my pleasure to help you. I'll be in touch soon. I spent longer than I should have staring at that last text. What did "it's my pleasure to help you" mean? Aside from the obvious. But why had he said it? Dima was not normally a very effusive person, unless he was letting the world know what he thought about crime, corruption, and incompetence. Then he was astonishingly eloquent. But other than that, he didn't express his feelings much. And that was such a something kind of thing to say. It was the kind of thing you'd say to a prospective lover to show them you were interested. That's what it was. I chewed on my lower lip a little. How long would I have to wait to hear from him again? However long it took him to get in touch with this Dave Wilkinson person, who I thought was another journalist. Who knows how long that would be. Meanwhile, though, I could start searching for Heather Ramirez on my own. I typed Heather Ramirez into the search bar and got 16,700,000 hits. Well, that would take a while to go through. I added investigative journalist to the search. That narrowed it down to 761,000 hits. But the second hit on the first page was for a website for a freelance journalist. When I brought up the site, there was a photograph on the homepage. It was a flattering professional headshot, but it was still of a hard-bitten, slightly overweight woman who had never been pretty, and now that she was approaching 50, had given up on personal appearance almost entirely. With a face that had seen a lot of harsh weather and harsher sights, and big poofy hair in a mulletish 80s throwback style. I might have found our journalist, I texted Frank and Alex, and sent them the link to Heather Ramirez's website. Chapter 15. Great job, Frank texted back. See if you can get in touch with her. That surprised me. Somehow I'd assumed that he or Alex would be the ones to talk to Heather. This was their search. I was just doing the computer stuff. But here Frank was telling me to get in touch with Heather, and Alex hadn't responded at all. Will do, I replied. Then I started going through the site looking for contact info. Unfortunately, there wasn't a phone number that I could find. There was an About page with Heather's background and education. There was a page on past projects with links to some of her more prominent articles. There was a page on current projects, which I read with interest. She was indeed working on a book about torture by the U.S. military, which had already been picked up by a major publisher. And there was a contact form that I could fill out if I wanted to get in touch with her. I went ahead and filled it out, explaining that I was a friend of Erin's, that she was missing, and that I was concerned that either she or Heather could be in danger, and to please contact me ASAP. I spent a moment worrying about telling a stranger and a journalist something that sensitive and potentially explosive, but I wanted a quick response, and this seemed the best way to get it. Besides, unlike Alex and Frank, I was naturally disposed to like and trust Heather. I did in fact believe it likely that she had our best interests at heart. Well, not theirs perhaps, but the nation's as a whole, yes. I knew all too well how relentless journalists could be in pursuing a story, and how willing they could be to sacrifice other things, but I still thought that Heather might be our best chance at actually finding and helping Erin. And if not, then maybe she would feel some pangs of conscience about putting pressure on an emotionally fragile person, which would enable her to achieve some worthwhile personal growth. I added my email and phone number and hit send. Then I texted Frank and Alex to let them know I'd done it. Great, Frank wrote back. I've been on the phone with Monterey PD. They said they haven't seen any sign of Erin, but they'll keep an eye out for her, see if they can locate her by pinging her phone. Although, they might not tell me if they find her. They seem to think I'm a dangerous ex-boyfriend who needs to be kept away, smiley face, smiley face. And I talked to her parents. They haven't heard anything from her for months. No surprises there, LOL. Too busy being rich San Diego socialites to pay attention to their only daughter. Anything to report, Miller? Nothing, Alex texted. I'm just stepping out of my 6th seedy bar for the evening. So far, I've only had the one hit. There are a couple more places to try, and then I'm out of ideas. I think Rowena's on our best line of inquiry right now anyway, Frank wrote. Any word from her yet, Ro? I had never told Frank he could call me Ro. I had never told Alex he could call me Ro. The only person permitted to call me Ro was my brother John. But here Frank was, doing it anyway on his own initiative. I thought for a nanosecond about making a fuss about it. Then I decided it would cause me a lot of trouble and fuss, and also make me look weak. One of the many useful life lessons I'd learned from speaking a foreign language and spending a lot of time in foreign countries is that fretting over what people call you is often a big waste of time and energy. The more you do it, the more power you give them over you. No, I wrote back, but I only emailed her 5 minutes ago. It might take a little while, and I'm waiting to hear if I can get her cell number, but I don't have it yet. Good going, texted Frank. How'd you get this intel anyway? I'm impressed. Personal contact, I wrote. I have an in with the journalism world, remember? I asked around and got her name as possibly our person. And I'm waiting to hear back from a friend of a friend about her cell number. Her website says she lives in Salinas. I'm doing a search in the local white pages right now to see if I can get her phone number that way. Oops, looks like I have to pay to get that info. I'll do it, Frank texted. Meanwhile, stand by for any emails from her. Will do, I promised, and went back to hovering by the computer. Chapter 16. After half an hour, I still hadn't heard anything from Heather. I'd spent the time skimming through the website for the clinical trial Dima had asked me to look into. As far as I could tell, it looked legit. I texted him to tell him that, and got no response. Dima wasn't always big on responding. At 10:30, Frank texted to say that he'd gotten Heather's number and called it, but only reached her voicemail. He'd left a message to call him back as soon as she could. So far, he'd heard nothing. Could mean she's out on a hot date, he wrote. Could mean she's avoiding us, or in trouble. Or could mean she has another phone she's using for some reason. I'm going to give Salinas PD a call just to give them a heads up. I'll let you know if I hear anything. I'm done here, Alex texted. No one knows anything. Heading home. Copy that. Stand by for further instructions. Over and out. I resisted an eye roll. Probably that was not an affectation. Probably that was the most natural way for Frank to communicate. I shut down my computer and got up to get a drink of water. My hair fell in my face. My hair was in serious need of cutting. One of the many things I hadn't had the time or the money to do all summer. What little time, money, and energy I'd had to spare for self-care had gone into my knee. Grit fell out of my hair and down my face. Ugh. I'd been sitting here all evening with ceiling dirt in my hair. I headed for the shower. When I got out, Alex was just coming through the door. He looked exhausted and somehow sad and lifeless in a way I'd never seen in him before. Hey, I said, you look beat. Maybe we should call it a night. Yeah. He stood at the center of the tiny kitchen, looking lost. I guess. I just feel like I'm letting Erin down if I'm not searching for her, you know what I mean? I know, I said, but you've done what you can. We've all done what we can. There's a good chance we'll find her soon. And ultimately, Erin's a grown woman who's made her own choices. He flinched. You think something bad's happened to her? I hope not. I think it's a good sign that the police don't know anything. If she'd driven off a bridge or something, they'd know. She's probably hiding out somewhere, feeling like shit. And that's sad, and I hope we can find her and help her. But she made her choices. She made her bed, and none of us can lie in it for her. Alex flinched again. It's not her fault, he said. No, not entirely. I know you said she had a rough childhood. Yeah, a real poor little Southern California rich girl. What was it Pearl Jam said? That's how it was for Erin. Her dad never paid her any attention, and she wasn't something pretty for her mom to wear. So she started chasing after boys to get any semblance of attention and affection. He shook himself. I'm pretty sure something awful happened to her in high school. Like, really awful. I'm sure you get the picture. Yeah, I said. I do. Poor girl. Yeah, so she joined up, maybe to piss off her parents, maybe to impress a guy, maybe to prove she was tough and macho and not a victim. And she wasn't. As long as she was wearing that uniform, she was the opposite. Sort of, I said. Sounds like she was still a victim in a way. She was used by others to carry out their terrible agenda, and now she's paying the price for it. Yeah, exactly. I guess you could say that in a way, her superior officers did to her just what those high school boys did, or worse. They treated her as a thing to be used for their purposes and thrown away to face the consequences. But at least she got to get a little taste of power in the process. Not that it did her any good. Probably it just did her more harm. Power often does, I said. Yeah, and in her case, she's not a bad person, not at heart. Alex raised his eyes to mine. Tears were standing in them. Jealousy lanced through me at the realization that the only time I'd ever seen him cry was over Aaron. Guilt went chasing right after it. I'm sure she's not a bad person, I said. In fact, I thought she was a bad person, or at least a person who was so consumed by her own misery that she made everyone around her miserable too. I was aware that my perspective was not completely objective. And, Alex was saying, looking at the sink which was dripping slightly rather than at me, it's like she's never had the chance to grow up. Not really. Neither of us did. We've been completely infantilized. Her especially, but me too. We've never been allowed to grow up and learn how to be decent human beings. I know, I said. Believe me, I know all about being infantilized. I'm in academia, remember? He smiled, bitterly, at the dripping sink, not at me. Yeah, he said. I know, right? I've spent my whole adult life knuckling under to infantilizing professions. First I was in college, and then I was in the military, and then I was back in college. Even when I got my PhD and started working as a professor, I was still stuck in a totally infantile state. Because even though both the military and higher ed will tell you that they're all about making a man or a free-thinking intellectual or a whatever of you, and they even try, okay, pathetically, but they try to do so, at their heart they're completely infantilizing. Higher ed is supposed to teach you to think for yourself, but for fuck's sake, I wasn't even allowed to make a 10-point vocab quiz without supervision. I remember standing there by the copy machine and printing off the quizzes I had been forced to redo because the language teaching director decided we hadn't picked the right vocab words from the vocab list of the first chapter of our first-year textbook, and thinking, I'm 33 years old, I graduated summa cum laude from one of the most prestigious universities in the nation, I'm a fucking war veteran, for Christ's sake, and they won't even let me do basic clerical work without constant supervision and critique. And the military wasn't much better. Okay, so we were responsible for expensive equipment. We were even responsible for making life and death decisions. But the basic mindset was one of such extreme abdication of responsibility that no one really thought at all. Everyone was always looking to the person above them to tell them what to do, say, even think. I could feel myself regressing to babyhood by the second. Except that even as a baby, I'm pretty sure I thought more for myself. Very likely, I said. And it was 10 times worse for Erin, because she was a girl, and because she was herself. There was something about her that made people want to take advantage of her. At least, that's what it seemed like to me. It seems like it to me, too, I said. Unfortunately. Maybe we can help her, I don't know, learn how not to be victimized. Ugh, why did I say that? I don't want to help her. Talk about letting yourself be victimized. But that wasn't quite true. Okay, it was true that I didn't want to help her. But that didn't mean I shouldn't. despite what a lot of American self-help gurus seem to think. Abandoning people when they really needed you was not a sign of strength. Erin did, in fact, need my help, so I should give it to her. It was as simple as that. "Let's go to bed," I said. Alex gave me a surprised look. "We've done all we can do tonight," I told him. "We've set all the wheels that we can in motion. Staying up all night wearing ourselves out won't do anything for Erin, and it might mean we won't be able to help her when she needs us. We should rest in order to be ready for tomorrow." "Yeah," said Alex. "I guess." "But take a shower first," I told him. "You smell like a dozen dive bars." He almost smiled. "Okay," he said. "You're right." Chapter 17. I woke up every 90 minutes like clockwork. Probably because of REM cycles or something. Every time I checked my phone. Absolutely nothing. Alex slept even more poorly than I did. In fact, I wasn't sure he slept at all. But by 6 a.m. he had drifted off into something that resembled sleep. I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling and trying not to wake him. At 6:13, my phone, which I'd had by my pillow despite my fear of it giving me brain cancer, vibrated. Moving with the care of someone juggling fine china in a hurricane, I picked up my phone and brought it to my face. "Darling Ina, good news. Dave got in touch with Heather. She said she'll talk to you. Here's her cell phone number." "Thanks," I texted back. "I'm in your debt." "You could never be in my debt, Ina. Good luck. Let me know how it goes." I squinted my sleep-blurred eyes at that text. Was I reading it right? Had Dima actually said that? What the fuck was he up to? Maybe he's not up to anything, I told myself. Maybe he's just being nice, and you're reading way too much into it. I told myself to stop thinking about it and worry about what to do with Heather's number instead. Call her right away. It was 6:15 on Saturday morning. Most people would not be happy to receive a call at that time. On the other hand, why had Dima only gotten back to me now? Presumably because he'd only just gotten her number, which meant she had only just given it to Dave, unless there'd been a delay somewhere in the relay process. "Wait until 7, I counseled myself. "Try and get some more sleep." I put down my phone, closed my eyes, and tried to think sleep-inducing thoughts. It only made me more restless. At 6:27, I gave up, got out my phone again, and sent a quick text message to Heather. If she was asleep, I reasoned, she'd have her ringer off and I wouldn't be disturbing her. If she was awake, then she could answer. But she was almost certainly asleep. At 6:29, a reply popped up on my phone screen. "Everyone must be really desperate to find Erin. You messaged me yesterday evening. I had some FBI agent leaving me messages last night, and now you're texting me again. Dave says you're okay, so I'll answer your questions if I can. Fire away." "Wow, you're up early," I texted back. "So are you. What did you want to know?" "When was the last time you saw Erin?" "Wednesday," she wrote back promptly. "We had dinner together at Duffy's, but she didn't want to talk to me, so I left. What's up with her? She's run off, you say?" "Yes, we're trying to find her. Do you have any suggestions?" "Aren't you her friend?" "Yes." It seemed best to keep it simple. But maybe she said something to you that would point us in the right direction. "I don't know what to tell you. She told me to go to hell on Wednesday, and I haven't heard from her since." "What were you talking about that got her so upset?" I asked. Maybe it would be helpful. Probably it wouldn't, but it would ease my curiosity to know. "That's between her and me." "Fair enough," I wrote. "I think I can guess anyway. I'm just wondering what it was about that last time that set her off. You'd been talking to her for weeks, right?" "Right," she confirmed. "But this time, oh fuck, might as well tell you. This time I showed her some testimony from one of the men she'd interrogated about what it was like for him and what his life has been like since then. And she got upset and started telling me I didn't know what it was like, what he was like, the situation they all found themselves in. So I said, "Well, tell me then." That's when she had her meltdown. "Not surprising," I wrote back. "No, but interesting. I'd really love to get her side of the story, especially since otherwise she's going to look like the black hat villain of the piece. But I know she's not. Or her hat was far from the blackest. I'm sure she could name some names, blow this whole thing wide open. If only she'd work up the nerve to do it. But as it stands, she's going to be my main bad guy unless she gives me something else to work with." "Does she know that?" I asked. "Yeah. My guess is that's why she's so messed up about it." "Yeah," I wrote. "Look, let me know if you hear from her, okay? We really are worried about her. And look out for yourself, okay? I don't want to think that she's dangerous, but, well, you're in a dangerous business." "Yeah," she texted. "Dave said you used to be Dima Kuznetsov's girlfriend?" "That's right." "That's the only reason I agreed to talk to you. Major respect to him for what he does. Although he was probably a pretty shitty boyfriend, I'm guessing. Smiley face, smiley face." "Something like that," I wrote. LOL, no kidding. I've dated men like him. Good God. I'm no angel myself, but Jesus Christ. I'm better off on my own. I figured that out years ago. Anyway, it sounds like you're a pretty cool person too, so I'll give you a heads up if I hear from Erin. You do the same, okay? "Okay," I wrote. "And for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. If I can convince her to talk to you, I will, although I don't have much pull with her." "Still appreciate it, smiley face, smiley face. Good luck." "Thanks." I put down my phone. Alex had opened his eyes at some point during this and was now on his side, looking at me with a tired but intent gaze. "That looked important," he said. It was, sort of. I outlined the conversation I just had with Heather. "Damn," he said when I'd finished. "I'd been hoping that we'd track down Heather and she'd lead us directly to Erin. But we're no closer to finding her than we were before." "Yeah," I said. "Still good to know, though. What next?" He gave a sort of half groan and flopped onto his back. "We talked to Frank," he said, speaking to the ceiling. "And we try to figure out where we go from here." Chapter 18. I texted Frank about the new developments while Alex was in the shower. "Good work," he texted back. "Although I'm pissed as shit at this Heather chick for blowing me off and talking to you, smiley face, smiley face. How'd you get her to open up, anyway?" "Personal connections," I wrote. "No shit. What kind of personal connections you got that could crack a tough cookie like that?" "My ex-fiancé has a lot of cachet with other journalists. She agreed to talk to me for his sake." "Well, damn," smiley face, smiley face. "We'd better keep you around, smiley face, smiley face. You still in touch with him?" I stared at the phone. What business was it of Frank's? Why on earth was he asking? Other than the obvious, of course. He was a nosy asshole. "That's how I got her number," I wrote. "I asked him, and he asked her." "Good for you, babe. Work those personal contacts. I know it hurts to ask an ex for favors, but sometimes you gotta suck it up and do what's best for the mission. And if there's still something between you, you can work that too. I bet he's still hot for you, huh?" I stared at the phone a bit more. Ugh, how did I respond to that? "I'm glad I could help," I texted. "Let's get together for breakfast and strategy," he wrote. "I'm here in Salinas at Erin's place. No sign of her all night. Why don't I drive down, meet you in Monterey, since that's the last place she was seen, and we put our heads together." "Okay." 0800 Tidal Coffee. "See you there," I wrote. Alex came out of the shower. "What's up?" he asked. "War council with Frank at 8, I told him. He nodded. "Makes sense. Frank knows what he's doing." I opened my mouth to point out that Alex had told me on multiple occasions how much he hated Frank. And he'd been beside himself over the shooting this spring. He'd wanted to cut off all contact with him, and spent several weeks trying to convince Erin to do the same. But she hadn't listened, and now Alex seemed to be coming around to a pro-Frank point of view. Worse than that, I was starting to feel a tiny pro-Frank sprout unfurling inside of me as well. A big part of it was probably just proximity. If you spent enough time with someone, oxytocin would do its thing, and you'd bond with them whether you liked them or not. And I was developing a certain grudging respect for Frank's intelligence, even if it did seem largely to manifest itself as low animal cunning. "He shot Erin," I reminded myself, "in the breast." As an armchair psychologist, I found that particular detail significant. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe he even consciously believed it was an accident. But he'd still aimed a loaded gun at her left breast and pulled the trigger, whether he consciously intended to or not. "You need to take a shower," Alex asked, breaking me out of my Frank-inspired reverie on the workings of the human subconscious. I shook my head. "I took one after the earthquake dumped a bunch of dust and dirt on me last night. I'm good to go." "Oh shit, right, the earthquake. I'd better text the building manager and let her know what's going on with that." He checked his phone. "I can do it on the way. Come on, let's go." Chapter 19. After a short argument, Alex allowed me to drive my car so that he could do the texting he needed to on the way over. "You see," I said as I turned onto Del Monte Avenue, "the car's working just fine." A nasty grinding noise emitted from the gearbox as I shifted into second. Alex looked up from his phone, his face wry. Okay, I brought that on myself. I should have known better than to brag about how well it's doing." "Yeah, Jesus, Rowena, what's wrong with you?" The words weren't kind, but his smile was warm and teasing. For a moment, I could feel that connection between us that had been there from the first day we'd met at that awful faculty meeting, when he'd trembled every time we'd leaned in close to each other. That connection had only grown stronger as we'd worked together, and then even stronger, strangely, when we'd been apart. That had been part of what had convinced me that we had a chance, we had a future together. But now that we'd spent the summer actually living together, it felt like the connection was fraying. And it wasn't because we fought over how to hang up the towels or who was going to do the dirty dishes. We didn't. It was because, damn it, I didn't know what was damaging the invisible cord that tied us together. "You do know," I told myself. "It's the cords tying you to others. They're pulling the two of you apart." I didn't like that thought at all. Lots of people had exes and still managed to make lives, good lives, together with someone. But maybe the issue here was that the exes weren't so ex as they should be. "Then you have to work harder at it," I told myself. "You have to choose each other, forsaking all others and all that stuff." But when I put it like that to myself, I wasn't sure I was ready. "Building manager said she'll come by this morning and check out the damage," Alex announced, looking up from his phone again. "She doesn't think it's serious, but she's going to take a look at it anyway. She said a couple other tenants have reported cracks in the walls and ceilings too." "Wow," I said. "What can they do about it?" "Realistically?" He shrugged. "Not much. Not unless they think there's been structural damage." "Geez," I said. "California is scary." "Scarier than hurricanes." "We don't get a lot of hurricanes in my part of Georgia," I pointed out. "No, just blistering, soul-searing heat. And bugs. And fucking poisonous snakes as long as your arm." "Hardly anyone ever dies from any of that, though," I said. "Cottonmouths are unlikely to go after you as long as you stay on dry land." So you say. I'm pretty sure my soul starts leaving my body at the very thought. Yankee, I said. You better believe it. Looks like Frank's here already. I pulled into the Cannery Row parking lot, where Frank was just getting out of his car. His back was to us, but that red buzz cut going to gray and that physique of a vigorous clan chieftain in the Highlands was unmistakable. He turned and saw us as I was pulling into a spot 2 spaces over. You folks are here early, he said, coming over to us. It was 7:50. So are you, I pointed out. He shrugged. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't sit around her empty house doing nothing. I wanted to get started, so here I am. He rubbed his eyes. Up close, he looked even more like a Highland chieftain, with ruddy skin that had seen too much sun and a muscled body that still looked strong and vigorous, despite the beginnings of middle age spread. When he smiled, like he was doing right now, the animal magnetism flowed out and caught anyone in its path, including, to my intense annoyance, me. I didn't like Frank. I didn't even think he was good-looking in any conventional sense. But wherever he went, heads turned, and people jumped to do his bidding. While we walked over, he filled us in on his side of the search. He'd driven over to her house in Salinas late in the evening and spent the night there. There'd been no sign of her. The Monterey PD called right before I left this morning and told me they had reason to believe she was safe, but they wouldn't tell me where the fuck she is. They must have pinged her phone and found her, but they're convinced I'm a fucking abusive boyfriend she's on the run from. He told us. He rubbed his face again, sounding more distracted than angry about it. But I went through her bathroom and closet. Her travel bag's gone, along with a couple of her favorite outfits and her makeup and hair things. That's good, right? I said. It means she wasn't, I don't know, kidnapped or something. Or that she was planning to harm herself. Yeah, but I don't know, he said. Something about it isn't right. When she's all fucked up and in a bad headspace, she doesn't pack an overnight bag and bring her hairdryer and her lip gloss collection. She just disappears and then comes back the next day looking like something the cat drug in. But this time she had a plan. But if she had a plan, why'd she cut out of work without telling anyone? Not to mention that fucking barbecue we're supposed to go to. I already called my friends up and said we wouldn't be able to make it. And I'm pretty fucking pissed about that for your sake, Ro. I really wanted you to meet these people, get to know them, make the good impression on them I know you could. But she's fucked things up for you too, as well as me and Miller. Only this time it looks like a premeditated fuck-up. Yeah, I said. We went in, ordered, and sat down. Frank started going over the possibilities again. What do you think, Ro? He asked me. Is this Heather chick telling the truth? Maybe she was winding you up, and she and Aaron had really made plans to get together so that Aaron could spill everything, and she was just telling you she didn't know where Aaron was. I don't think she was lying, I said, but I don't know her, and we were texting. It's entirely possible that I'm wrong. But why would she lie? Frank shrugged. Who the fuck knows? 'Cause she likes fucking with us? 'Cause she's afraid of us? 'Cause she and Aaron have cooked up some $1 million scheme they don't want to cut us in on? Why would she be afraid of us, I asked. What kind of $1 million scheme could she and Aaron have cooked up? Frank and Alex exchanged glances. For a moment I could see a connection between them, a cord tying them together even more tightly than the one that tied me and Alex together. Alex had told me back in the spring that he didn't think Frank remembered him from their time in Iraq together. Alex had been a minor desk jockey, a low-level bureaucrat who'd processed the voluminous paperwork that a state-sponsored program of torture and interrogation generated. Or, so he said. I'd never doubted him before. But now, seeing that look between him and Frank, I found myself wondering. It was clear that even if Frank hadn't remembered him before, he did now, and that they both knew more than they were telling me. See, Ro, said Frank after a long silence. Erin, well, she knows stuff. Yeah, I said. I gathered. And not just ordinary stuff you'd expect her to know. Like about all that. Other stuff. Stuff worth $1 million? I asked. Frank and Alex both nodded tightly. I said, okay. Is this something I want to know about too? They both shook their heads. Should I know about it? I pressed. Am I in danger because of it? Alex shook his head in immediate and vehement denial. Frank paused. I don't want to think so, Ro, he said. He paused again, in obvious thought. Nah, he said. You shouldn't be in any danger because of it. As long as you don't get mixed up in it too much. Don't get in anyone's way. I said. Okay. How do I make sure I don't get in anyone's way? Frank and Alex shared another look. I hated it even more than the previous look. It spoke so strongly of shared experience, shared knowledge, shared complicity in something I could never share with them. Maybe you should go back to the apartment, Alex said. Spend the day there. Like, you mean, in hiding? He winced. No, just keeping a low profile. I wanted to protest. I wanted to demand what on earth was going on. I wanted to point out that all the breaks in the case we'd gotten so far had been because of me and my effort and my personal contacts. Then I thought of all the secrets they were keeping from me, and my extreme lack of desire to get mixed up in whatever dirty business they were involved in, that had fucked Erin up so much she had spent the past decade barely functional, that was eating at Alex's soul and making him betray the good man he should have been. Okay, I said. Good idea. I need to do laundry and pack and stuff anyway. I'll go home and do that. Let me know if you need me to do any more computer searches or anything like that. And I'll let you know if I hear from Heather or Erin. Both men relaxed. Great, said Alex. That's great. Great plan. He smiled, rebuilding for a moment that connection that had always been between us. Thanks, Rowena. You're really helping us out. No problem, I said.